Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
Yo, what is up everybody, it's Joe the Great here, back with another Naruto related video. And as you can tell by today's title, I'm going to attempt to answer the question of, is Naruto planetary? So folks, this particular topic has been one of high debate and conversation for many years now. But lately, particularly in the last couple of weeks, there has been a resurgence in conversation and debate over this particular topic, primarily because of this sort of cross-platform war between particularly the TikTok Naruto fandom and the YouTube Naruto fandom, and of course, the high-profile conflict between Six, shout out to Six, and King Lion from TikTok. So because of that, I decided to join the conversation, and as well as because of many misconceptions and classic fallacious arguments I heard as far as this topic is concerned. Now, before we get into actually attempting to answer the question of is Naruto planetary, I think it's first important to clarify the differences between AP, or attack potency, and DC, or destructive capacity. I see that many individuals in general tend to conflate these two terms when discussing the scaling of a character. Now, destructive capacity is the amount of surface area that any such set attack can destroy and or affect, whereas attack potency is the energy output equivalent required to achieve such destruction. Now, in the real world, these colloquial scaling terms, because they are colloquial, and general distinctions are usually not required, as the law of constant energy, aka the principle of physics known as the conservation of energy, is constantly upheld, with this law in layman's terms essentially stating that energy is simply transformed regardless of the kind of energy it is, but the amount of energy itself is constant. Now, a good example of this in the real world is chemical energy being converted into kinetic energy when a stick of dynamite explodes, because the energy output is the same before and after the explosion, despite the kinetic energy being dispersed, aka the explosion being much more apparent observably to the naked eye. So because of this, we are going to be naturally and by default accustomed to seeing any such shed energy output, especially kinetic energy primarily, showing the destructive capacity based on that very energy output. However, the reason the two terms are needed when discussing fiction is due to the fact that in fiction, the laws of physics and general reality aren't always upheld, which can be due to a multitude of reasons, which include, but are not limited to, restrictions of media and manga drawing, possible hackability simply not abiding by the laws of physics or defying them, and even the inconvenience of having to constantly animate and or draw large amounts of destruction, especially in fictional verses that have very powerful characters such as Dragon Ball Super and One Punch Man, as not only would this be inconvenient to do constantly, but obviously detrimental to the plot, as destroying Earth would most likely kill many of the most important characters in the narrative, including villains, side characters, and maybe even the MC, him or herself. Hence, let me make it very clear that the argument of I need to see it to believe it when scaling how powerful someone is in fiction is a blatant appeal to ignorance and not an actual logically valid refutation to actual proper scaling. So with that out of the way, let's actually attempt to answer the question now of, is Naruto planetary? Now, truth be told, for the majority of the Naruto narrative, we don't see characters even display any feats even remotely close to planetary. However, that begins to change once the narrative gets to the tail end of the war arc. Kaguya Otsutsuki specifically was stated by the databook and observably shown and stated in the narrative to be capable of destroying and creating time spaces, aka dimensions, that are at least relative or perhaps even the size of blatantly to a solar system, as in the manga and anime. You can observe celestial bodies in these dimensions that she constructs, such as a sun radiating sunlight in the time-space Sasuke was temporarily trapped in, and multiple moons in the ice dimension within Kaguya's ice dimension, indicating that this dimension also has celestial bodies, which obviously indicates a dimension far beyond the size of just one single celestial body or planet. This indicates that Kaguya Otsutsuki is capable of producing levels of energy far beyond the output necessary to destroy a single celestial body or planet. And as we all know, Naruto, Kakashi, and even Sakura were able to damage her, even causing her to lose limbs in the case of Naruto and Kakashi specifically. Later on in the narrative, particularly in the last, Naruto is shown casually one-shotting Tornado Otsutsuki, which even surprised Toneri, a lower tier Otsutsuki, who with ease cut the moon in half, clearly not using his maximum attack potency, considering the attack he used didn't seem to hinder his ability to continue battle in any significant way. And for those that say the moon is hollow, there's no indication of that, and in fact, craters being made prove via contradiction that that's not the case, as if the converse were the case, there would be no craters possible, and there'd only be holes in the moon every time you were to strike it. So no, the moon isn't hollow, and this is actually quite an impressive feat by Toneri and Naruto transitively. Later on in Boruto, it is quite obvious that Naruto has gotten older from this point, reaching his prime as a shinobi, taking on the likes of opponents even beyond the likes of Kaguya Otsutsuki, which is stated multiple times, such as Fuse Momoshiki, with him and Sasuke having very impressive performances against opponents of this caliber, even while being fatigued, specifically again against Fuse Momoshiki. Additionally, just to further substantiate my obvious answer to this question, Naruto while on Earth is stated multiple times to not be going all out because of the very level of AP he possesses, having full control of the Nine Tails, as well as the 6 past powers he acquired during the war arc. He then goes on to become even more powerful when utilizing Baryon mode and dominate the strongest villain he has ever faced, which is stated in Ishiki Otsutsuki, only further substantiating an above planetary level of AP. So again, us not ever observing him actually destroying a planet does not prove that Naruto is unable to destroy a planet, as again, if Kishimoto and company were to constantly uphold the laws of constant energy in the verse, then they would require planets constantly being destroyed, which simply isn't practical for the narrative and plot, obviously. Hence, via induction as well as Occam's razor, the most rational conclusion to come to is that Naruto is able to triumph over characters who surpass planetary levels of AP via Newton's third law of motion, which states that every action has an equal reaction, which in layman's terms essentially means that if you're able to output a certain level of energy or AP, you must have the durability to withstand the very such force of that energy or AP. And because of this, he too is capable of reaching levels of AP that are that high. Now please note, while I did say earlier that laws of physics sometimes aren't upheld in fiction, Newton's third law of motion is much easier to uphold in fiction in comparison to the law of constant energy, as the former doesn't require the constant depiction of large amounts of destruction and damage, as opposed to the latter, with the idea of recoil being spoken and displayed in the narrative constantly. So with that question answered, some of you may be asking, well, just how high does the Naruto verse actually scale? Well, that question is actually a little harder to answer, as energy output calculations are obviously impossible to get definitively. However, we can get a sort of range that is quite safe to use when scaling Naruto characters. So, particularly with the Kaguya Otsutsuki feats, which give us some of the best qualitative information to go off of, I would say the Naruto verse scales somewhere in between the range of large star to up until solar system level. Particularly the highest of caliber of individuals, I would feel more safer classifying as solar system, particularly Ishiki Otsutsuki, Baryon mode Naruto, and perhaps Fuse Momoshiki and Prime Sasuke. Now, you can even go higher than this, but then you have to start speculating even more so, as these classifications of power beyond solar system are just gargantuan, such as galaxy and above. That's why I don't really conform to the idea of the Narutoverse being universal, as that requires more empirical backing, in my opinion. So large star level to possibly solar system level is sort of a mid-ball, if you will, as far as how high the Narutoverse scales. Now, low ball, I would say, is honestly planetary. I think it's quite easy to prove that they're at least planetary, which again, this was the topic of today's video. A high ball, I'd say, is somewhere between galaxy and universal, with the former being a little bit easier to prove. Not even prove, but logically try to rationalize, because I don't think there's any empirical backing to prove that, but rather rationalizations perhaps, or logic that aren't empirically backed. But yeah, folks, that's about it for today's video. I kind of wanted to just join the conversation, as again, this topic has been trending, particularly the last couple of weeks with the Six versus King Lion conflict. And again, shout out to Six for defending what I believe is the proper position, which is that Naruto is obviously above planetary. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below, whether you agree with me, your thoughts in general with the answer to this question, and any other comments you may have. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one. This is Jay the Great signing out. Peace.